Hi everyone, my name is Jamie. I was looking at the short story by Barbara Bayton called The Chosen Vessel.
Hi guys, my name's Brooke and I will be discussing the article by Sarah Atfield called On Being a Working Class Writer.
And I'm Olivia, and I looked at the article Why Working Class Literature Matters by Sherry Lincoln. So, Brooke, how does Atfield's personal experiences in having a working class background influence her work in the literary world?
So Atfield grew up in a working class family in London, and in her article, she discusses some of these experiences, reflecting on how her background in the working class has shaped her approach to writing and the way she sees the world. And she notes that her experience of growing up in a working class family have given her a particular perspective on social class and inequality, as well as deepened her understanding of the challenges faced by the working class people because she is from that background. Um, so, Jamie, what was Barbara Bainton's connection to working class literature and the fiction she wrote?
So, Barbara Bayton was an Australian writer, daughter of immigrants from Ireland. Her father was of working class background, working as a carpenter. She gained class mobility after marrying a retired surgeon with literary and academic connections. Of course, at that time, the only way a woman could gain class mobility was through marriage, not through their own merit. Olivia, what inspired Lincoln to write about working class issues?
So, I found it interesting how she became inspired to write to study the working class communities, in part to understand her students better. So, as a professor, she wanted to find strategies to help her students to work class students to succeed in their learning. So she explored the intersections between the students' personal histories, cultural identities, social positions, and their learning experiences.
Uh, I have another question for you, Olivia. How does Lincoln then define working class writing to be?
So the author Sherry Lincoln, she mentions that working class writing focuses on work, providing an accurate representation of material and the social conditions of working class life. So it's validating working class culture, resistance to existing power structures, rejection or critique of the standard middle class narrative of upward mobility. So, how does the short story The Chosen Vessel by Barbara Bainton adhere to the working class literary genre?
So the short story adheres to this genre as it portrays a somewhat realistic view of what working class people experience. It's the realism of working class issues such as low income and instability that are portrayed through a depiction of the shack that the main character resides in. Working class writing was not designed to be this aesthetically pleasing piece. It is a non-conforming to writing conventions, and this is very true for the short story The Chosen Vessel. The narrative uses simplistic language and this haunting imagery that is not intended to be agreeable to the reader. So, does Atfield believe that working class writers must personally be a part of the working class citizens?
So Atfield argues that having lived within the working class means that she can bring a unique and realistic perspective to her working class writing, as she has personally experienced the class struggles, the social injustices, and the prejudice that comes from it being a part of that group. And she highlights that middle class writers may not be able to capture those complexities and distinctions of that experience in the same way that a working class writer from the working class can. However, Atfield doesn't explicitly state that working class writers must be of the working class. In fact, in her article, she states that she currently considers herself a middle class woman, but she writes about the working class because she wants their perspective to be recognized and supported more in the literary world, and it's something that she connects to.
So, Olivia, how does the text, the Why Working Class Literature Matters, depicts a struggle between classes?
So she mentions how, with unemployment rates growing, it makes the working class perspective even more important. She says how pop culture mainly relies on narratives that blame the poor and working class for their hardships. So it's the idea that only people with specific kind of experience have the authority to write about or critique literature about that experience. So with writers' own experiences and perspectives, while that does matter, you also need to recognize the significance of representations of working class culture by writers from more elite backgrounds. So does working class representation factor into Atfield's involvement with greater discussions regarding social class structures, struggles, and representation in literature?
So yes, she argues that working class writers are often underrepresented and undervalued in literature, and that this lack of representation can create stereotypes and reinforce class divisions within the literature scene. She discusses the importance of writers being able to write about their own experiences and perspectives, and how this can contribute to a more diverse and representative literary world. She also notes that working class writers can bring a unique perspective to their writing that is informed by their experiences of class and inequality, and that this perspective should be valuable and should be more recognized and supported within the literary world. And in addition, Atfield also discusses the way in which class intersects with other forms of identity, such as race, gender, and sexuality. And she argues that working class writers who belong to marginalized communities face multiple barriers to recognition and success in the literary industry, and that they all need to be addressed to create a more diverse literary landscape. So how is the intersectionality of class and gender then represented in Bait in the Short Story, Jamie?
So the events of the short story would not have occurred had the protagonist been male. They just wouldn't have occurred if the husband was the main character in the story. Similarly, they would not have occurred to a woman of high class, as she would not have been left alone in the vulnerable state that she was. It is this intersectionality of class and gender that allows for the horrific events of the narrative to occur and to address these marginalized groups. What does Lincoln describe as being the issue in studying working class writing?
So it's recognition that writers, readers, and characters all have multiple identities. So we have at least one gender, race, sexuality, ethnicity, and class. And our experiences and point of views are shaped by all of those categories, not just the one. So it's work class literature to reflect intersections between these categories, not just ideas about class itself. So it's important to assume that not everyone belonging to the same group is going to be the same. In what ways does Atfield criticize the systemic barriers that prevent working class writers from becoming successful?
So the publishing industry is often dominated by middle class individuals who have more access to opportunities and support for their writing. So this can include funding and access to adequate resources such as writing workshops and mentoring. And these individuals from the middle class also might find it challenging to understand and relate to the challenges and experiences of a working class writer. And then this is backed up by Atfield's own experience of working full-time while writing her first novel. She states that her full-time job affected her ability to attend writing workshops and other literary events that could have helped her become a better writer, and that these specific events were easily accessible to middle-class writers who not only had more time to write because they weren't working, but they had more money too. And to finish off the argument, in her article, she says that the lack of diversity can lead to a narrow range of voices being heard in the literary world, which makes it extremely difficult for working class writers to break through and actually become a successful and well-known writer. So how does the chosen vessel resist existing power structures even today?
So, one obvious way is that the protagonist is a woman and not one of high class, making it working class writing. Furthermore, the religious figure in the story is not represented in a positive way, and he adds to the misery experienced by the woman. The religious aspect of the story was not well received, as you can imagine, by readers and publishers of the time, as the religious figure at the end of the story mistakes a working class rape victim as the Virgin Mary. Obviously, the Virgin Mary is highly regarded, so to consider someone who is so low class as the Virgin Mary was not a good look. Even today, to have a story focus on a woman and discuss heavy topics such as sexual assault, It gives a voice to the working class group in a realism sort of way.
Interesting. So, how are working class men portrayed within the short story, The Chosen Vessel?
So obviously, men are not portrayed well. Men in working class literature are often the heroes. They are the protagonist. However, in Barbara Bacon's short story, it clearly opposes this heroic view of working class men in that the husband is dominating, cruel, and short-tempered. And similarly, the swagman, who is our villain, treats her as disposable as he uses her body and discards her. He is not this heroic working class man that is portrayed in Australian literature. How does Atfield's writing support her claim that working class writers contribute to a distinct viewpoint and voice to the literary world?
So Atfield notes that working class writers often come from different cultural and social backgrounds and have had different life experiences than their middle class counterparts. So this means that their writing can offer unique insights into the lives of working class people and their struggles and their experiences of the world. She also notes that working class writers often have a distinct writing style and a voice that can challenge the norms of the standard literary world, as working class writers may use language and dialects that are not traditionally accepted in literature, but they offer a more authentic representation of working class experiences that readers from the working class can relate to. So why is it then important to study working class writing, Olivia?
So, in her article, Lincoln talks about how it's important to have stories which exposes readers to complex reality of working class life. So, it's without erasing the struggles of economic hardship, family dysfunction, or a limited option. So, it's working class literature reminds us of the strengths and of working class culture. So, humor, integrity, hard work, and having strong interpersonal connections.
Awesome. So thank you so much for listening. We hope that you've learned something about the working class literature and about these texts that we've studied today.
Thank you.